All right, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome back to Oxygen for the Soul. Today's parasha is Parasha Ki Tissa. And this parasha, you'll notice the first two aliyot, the first two readings in the Torah are super long. And then the rest of the parasha is really short. The aliyot are really short. And the reason for that is because our rabbis wanted to ensure that we didn't get too depressed and spend too much time hearing about all the tragedies and the bad mistakes that the Jewish people make, because people make mistakes sometimes. We make bad choices, and we shouldn't be, constantly reminded about those bad choices. But instead, we should recognize that, we make mistakes, and we could build better and do more by becoming greater. We recognize that our past mistakes are bad, but we don't allow those mistakes to define us. The parasha begins with God asking Moshe. He says as follows: "He's Vayidaber Hashem el Moshe," right? And he says. God speaks to Moses and he says as follows: Ki Tissa et rosh b'nei Israel. When you are going to take a census of the Jewish people, v'natnu ish kofer nafsho leHashem, and each person is going to give according to their number, right, before God, as a atonement, bifkorotam, as an atonement. Why? V'lo yeh behem negeh bifkorotam, so that there will not be a plague when they are actually counted. Now, this is a very strange verse for lots of reasons. Number one is, what does the word tissa mean? Ki tissa. The word tissa is translated as census, but if you understand Hebrew, the word tissa, biblical Hebrew at least, tissa, and also in modern Hebrew, tissa means to carry, right? You're carrying something. Now, this parasha talks about this idea of taking a census, and the way in which we take a census is through the act of giving. What do you give? It says, Ze yitnu, this is what they give. Kol ha'oved al pukudehem, machzit shekel b'shekel kodesh. Every single person who wants to be counted has to give a half a shekel. Okay, now, why a half a shekel? Remember, the Torah isn't just a book that you read. The Torah is a book that's designed to help you question. So number one is, why is the Torah using the word tissa to describe, counting a census when it really means carrying? And then the other question is, why do I have to give something? Why does giving a shekel, machzit a shekel, I can't even give a whole shekel. I have to give a half a shekel, right? Why is giving a half a shekel the way in which, we use to count the Jewish people? And are we really afraid about plagues? So let me give you some interesting facts. Anyone know how many people live in China? There are approximately 1.4 billion Chinese citizens in China. Okay, that's a lot of people. Do you know what the margin of error for the census is? About 30 million. Ready? How many Jews live on planet Earth? About 15 million. The margin of error for the Chinese census is double the size of the whole entire Jewish people on planet Earth. Okay? Now, why do governments like to count the numbers of their citizens? Why do they do that? Why are they counting their people? Now think about it for a minute. You see, we live in a world where we believe that there is strength in numbers, and therefore volume, sheer size, that's where power is. And therefore the most powerful country in the world should be China, and number two should be India. That's where power is. More means better. More people, more strength, more army, more everything. But this is not necessarily true, because in Judaism we recognize that it's so easy to believe that chitzoniyut, this externality of measuring the number, sheer size of people, that's where you're going to believe strength comes from. And as Jews, we reject this nation. Why do we reject it? For lots of reasons. Number one is the Torah makes it very clear that the Jewish people are always going to be small in numbers, but we're going to be as great as the stars and as numerous as the sand. Why as great as the stars? As great as the stars. How many stars do we see? Small stars, but they make a big impact. Lots of sand that can't be destroyed. The reason why I believe the pasuk says Ki Tissa et rosh, when you're going to carry these people's heads, the Torah is teaching you a very important lesson. How do you evaluate the value of a human being? When you're looking at someone, what determines that person's value in your mind? Oh, this guy's chashuv. He's a doctor. Oh, he's a lawyer. I had someone call me a few days ago, said, oh, my daughter's just going out, such a great guy. He's a surgeon. And I'm thinking in my head, just because he's a surgeon doesn't mean he's a good guy. What does one have to do with the other, right? What is the relationship between someone being good and the career that he has? Now, I'm all for people having careers, make lots of money. have a great career, go to school, get an education, no question about it. But people all too often get caught up with titles. Oh, this person is so special because they're a dentist. This one is a pulmonologist. This one is a dermatologist, or whatever the practice may be. Okay, I love doctors. I was a pre-med student. I get it. But coming from my world, I was doing it for one reason alone. I wanted to have MD plates on my car so I could park anywhere. I wanted to have the ability of saying, I'm a doctor. Or I wanted to give my mom the opportunity of saying, hey, my son is a doctor. That's every Jewish mom's greatest dream. But I robbed her of that dream, unfortunately, and just became a rabbi. So, but I will say this. We all too often allow the titles of things to show the value of someone. And it's a mistake. And this parasha teaches us that. How? Who's giving the machzit the shekel? Everybody. It doesn't matter how much money you have in your bank. It doesn't matter what kind of a car you're driving. It doesn't matter what kind of a title you have. It doesn't matter, what schools you went to. We're all giving the same exact thing, because ultimately, at the end of the day, what really matters is this. Listen up. It's not what you have in the bank. It's not the schools you went to. It's not the career you have. You know what it is? It's what you give. So where does giving have to do with value? Now, if you think about it, in the world of business, in a world where people are capitalists, looking for opportunities to cha-ching, make that money, right? They're always thinking about what they can take from their profession. If you're a real estate person, then you're thinking about how to make a deal. If you're, dealing diamonds, then you're trying to figure out how to sell this for the greatest profit. You're only thinking about what you're taking from the environment. And that's important. Greed is a very powerful tool. And we want you to be greedy on some level. But what happens to a person if their whole entire essence in life becomes about how I can take from my environment? Do you see what happens? The Chavetz Chaim tells an amazing story. He says that there was a student that came to him and said, Rabbi, I can't be in yeshiva anymore. I got to get a job. And I got a job in a bank. So he says, you think it's a good idea? Should I take the job? So the Chavetz Chaim says, well, I love the idea of you having a job, but it depends on which job you're going to get in the bank. Because there's two positions back then. There's two positions at the bank. One position was being the guy that did the withdrawals, and who was always giving the money back to the people, taking the money out of the account. And the other one is the guy who was taking deposits. So the Chavetz Chaim said, if you're going to take a job, make sure you don't do deposits, only do withdrawals. So the kid looks at him and says, why? What difference does it make if it's depositing, withdrawal? He says, don't you get it? If all day you're involved in giving people back their money, you're creating an inner mindset that turns you into a giver. Versus someone who's always taking, right? Depositing. On some level, that changes his mindset into thinking about taking. The Parasha is teaching you, Ki Tissa. You want to know where you carry a person and show their real value? It's what they give. Now think about it. What are you giving? A machzit shekel. I'm a big baller and I want to give 10 shekel. I want to give 20 shekel. Why not? I want to throw it. No, you can't do that. Why? Because you're only a half a shekel. When you realize that you're just a half of a whole, when we as a community realize that I am a half, and only when you come into my orbit do I become whole. That when you are in my space together, that we become shalem, we become one. That is the real mark of a human being. It can't just be about me. People all too often make this mistake. I had a guy today in the Bet Knesset who said to me, my relationship with God is more important. I'm like, no. I said to him, my relationship with you is more important than my relationship with God. He said, what do you mean? I'm like, what do you mean? What do I mean? I break Shabbat. I mechalel Shabbat to save your life. I throw Yom Kippur. If me eating means helping you, I have a responsibility to do it. My mom would use that argument on me all the time. She convinced me not to fast when I was younger. It didn't work. But I'm talking about when your life is threatened, right? When your life is threatened, you have a responsibility to save somebody else as a result of it. Someone else's life is threatened. I break all the rules for that person. Why? Because God is telling you, my friends, that The relationship between man and man, humanity between human beings, is greater than the relationship between man and God. This week's Parasha echoes this idea. Why? You see that we're only a chetzi shekel, we're not even a whole shekel. But listen to this idea. This is powerful. Ready? This is the Vilna Gaon. If you're into like numerology stuff, this is going to blow your brains out. He says like this, the word machzit, which means half, right? He says, look at the middle letters. The middle letter, right there in the middle, is a tzaddik. There's 5 letters, okay? The middle letter is tzaddik, which always represents righteousness, or tzedek, tzedakah, charity. He says, look at the 2 letters that are closest to it. It's chet and yud, which means chai. The people that are always giving are the people that are going to be living. They're people that are living life. They're the people that see the beauty and the value that life is all about loving and giving. The furthest letters, the mem and the taf, right, represent met, death. The people that are so far from giving are people that are not even alive. They're what I call the walking dead. They're the zombie apocalypse, right? When we talk about life, to be alive means to be giving. And I'll prove it to you. Ready? Who loves you more than anyone else in the world? You know what the answer is? Your mother. I saw Tanaz say mom, right? So your mom, right? What's that? Why does a mother love more than any other child, than anyone else in the world? I'll tell you why. You see, we make a mistake in thinking that, well, listen, you had a child and now I have to love my kid. That's not true, right? I've often had scenarios where some of my kids got me to a place where I thought about just getting rid of them. And I told them, I threatened my kids before. I said, if you don't like it here, don't worry about it. I'll get rid of you. I'll make more. You know what I'm saying? The world doesn't surround you. Like be good, behave. So I met a girl a few years ago. We weren't sure about her status as a Jew. And we decided that we were going to prepare her to go through conversion. What was the issue? She was an orphan, and her mother gave her up for adoption. And amazing Italian family raised her Catholic. She found out later in college that her mother was in fact Jewish, but couldn't prove it in New York State. It's illegal to share, the birth certificate from the mom because of adoption laws and so on and so forth. She couldn't get access to her mother. But she had this deep sense of like, I know I'm Jewish, I'm not Christian, there's something there. She went through the whole entire conversion process. And she just found out 2 weeks after going to the mikveh that her mother was in fact Jewish. But now she knows 100% that she's Jewish. She did everything. Why am I sharing this? How does a mother give birth to a kid and get rid of them? Giving birth to someone doesn't equal, I love you. It doesn't equal, I'm going to take care of you forever. Do you know why, those of you that have children on this call, do you know why we love our kids? Because we've provided for them for so long. There's a deep relationship between loving and giving, and I'll prove it to you. The word for love in Hebrew is ahava, right? Ahava, the root word, the shoresh of the word ahava comes from the word hav, which means to give. How do we build love? Through giving. How do you learn to love your spouse? You've given to your spouse more than anyone else. By the way, this is very important. Listen very carefully. How do you get your spouse to love you? By creating a space for them to give to you. Don't create a relationship where you're not allowing your spouse to give to you, because the nature of the giving itself is what generates the love. It's not the emotions. The emotions are there too. But the real love is generated from this act of giving. And therefore, the more you create a reality where you're allowing the other to give, that is where the love comes from. The reason why your mom loves you more is because she carried you, she fed you, she changed you, she clothed you, she did everything for you. That's where her love comes from. It's not infinite. It's not arbitrary. It's not, oh, you have a kid you love. Because I could think of thousands of scenarios where kids are not loved by their parents. By the way, how do we learn to love our parents? The old way of, the old school way of, a parent-child dynamic was that as the parents got older, the children helped the parents. How do we learn to love our parents? By giving to our parents. By thinking about the things that they need and providing them with their needs. It's interesting that the halacha of kibud av va'em comes from, giving your parents food and clothing. And the baseline halacha is not even with your money, with their money. Because the halakha ultimately recognizes that the only way we're going to get you to learn to love is by creating a process where at the very minimum, you're in a space where you're giving back to your parents. Caring for the elderly is how we care for our parents. And in this country, how do we treat our parents? They're too old, put them in an old age home. I don't want to deal with it. I'll hire a nurse. What you're doing is beautiful on some level because you're caring for them, but what you're losing out is the beautiful opportunity of learning to love a parent through the act of giving. The machzit shekel is a reminder, my friends, that we're halves, we're not wholes. But people around us remind us that I have a responsibility of becoming a lover of life by giving and not just taking from the world around me. How are we giving? And I believe that this message is so profound. It's this idea is taught in the Parasha of what? Of Chet HaEgel. It's taught in the Parasha of Moshe destroying the Luchot. It's taught in the Parasha where the Jewish people were selfishly thinking only about their wants and their needs. They were a stiff-necked Am Kshei Oref, we're called in this week's Parasha. It's a good thing and a bad thing, right? On the one hand, we're stubborn. And on the other hand, we're stubborn. We're stuck. Stubbornness can be this, I'm bullheaded, I'm not moving away from anything, I'm clear about what I want in life. And it also becomes something that allows me to not hear the value and the beauty in another person. So the Parsha is reminding you, how do we get there? How do we create a world of love? You create a world of love through the art of giving. The mark of a man, the measure of a person's greatness is not measured by who they are as individuals, but rather it's measured by their desire to give. The real value you have is by what you give and not by what we take. That's the lesson I want to teach my children. The lesson I want to teach my kids, that if you want to become a lover of life, you shouldn't be asking about what you can take from the world, what vacations you can go on, what treats you can have. You should be thinking about how you can give back to the world and make it a greater place. This week's Parasha is talking about that. This is the lesson that we're meant to walk away with. You could ask this question to your children. How do you evaluate if a person's a good person? What's the metric you're using? Is it the cool clothes they wear? Is it the good grades they get? Because those are not metrics of greatness at all. They're metrics of a good fashion sense and maybe academics, but that doesn't make a person a good person. There are plenty of brilliant people that were psychopaths, that did horrible things. Greatness comes from those that desire to give. Love, ahava, each letter, aleph, he, vav, he, is the gematria, the numerical value of 13. 13 is a precious number in Judaism. Do you know why? Because 13, not only does it mean love, it is also the same number for echad. Aleph, chet, daled is also 13. So when we love, we become one. As long as we're selfish and we only think about our own needs, we're a chetzi, we're a machzit. We're the outer letters of machzit. The mem and the taf, we're met, we're dead. But when we become active givers, we're the tzaddik, we're chai, we're alive. I wish, if you want to understand where the sickness of the wealth of this generation comes from, it comes from here. It comes from a generation of people that are only thinking about how they could use what they have to take from their world, and not enough about how they can give back to the world. We are not creating children that are lovers of life. We're creating children who are only takers from life. We're really part of the Walking Dead. Maybe this explains why we have such a high suicide rate. Maybe this explains why there's so much mental illness in the world today, because we haven't taught people the most valuable lesson of all, which is that real happiness does not come from the external things that we have. It comes from our own inner compass of becoming someone who's in love with giving back to the world that we're currently in. That is what we are here for, my friends. We're here for a short period of time. The question we should be asking ourselves is, how are we giving back? Not how many more vacations could I go on? How can I make money? Go on vacation. I'm not saying you shouldn't do that. Do all those things. I recommend it. As the rabbi, I'm telling you, go out, have fun, party, but not at the expense of creating a reality where all you are seeing is taking. We have to be asking ourselves, how do we lift ourselves up, become something more, recognize that we're chetzi, we're half, and together through the act of giving, we become true lovers of life. May you all be blessed with the power and the recognition that you are ultimate real givers, that true lovers of life want to give and give and give, and it's infinite. Your real happiness comes from the things that you do for others, not from the things that you take. Those things, those feelings, the nice watch, the nice coat are nice, but those things are transient. Those things are for a short period of time. We get bored of things all the time, which is why we're always looking for new things. You want to stop looking for excitement? Figure out a way of giving back, and you'll live a life of love and true happiness. Shabbat Shalom, everybody. Thank you so much for listening.